the scenic railroad, from the snow-capped mountains to the sunny coast, on the great scenic railway journey.
Hi, I'm David Holt, and welcome back to Great Scenic Railway Journeys. Well, it's time to continue our journey, visiting some of the most scenic and historic tourist steam railways in North America. Coming up in this episode of Great Scenic Railway Journeys, we'll venture deep in the forest of the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia to see some of the early logging locomotives that are still in operation today. First stop, the Cass Scenic Railroad. It boasts the largest roster of Shay logging locomotives in the world. We'll climb on board one of these historic engines for a journey to Bald Knob, the third highest peak in West Virginia, standing at just over 4,800 feet. Take a tour of one of the logging camps along the line. See the original company town, sawmill, along with stepping into the back shops and watch skilled workers restoring their fleet of steam engines. Next, we'll venture a few miles north of Cass to the old logging town of DURBIN. Here we'll catch a ride behind a 1910 Climax steam locomotive as it travels along the beautiful Greenbrier River. This railroad has a vast collection of historic cabooses. The most popular are their castaways, which afford riders a unique opportunity to camp in the great outdoors. We'll also show you the efforts to restore parts of the line that were washed out by catastrophic floods in 1985. Our last stop takes us deep into the San Juan Mountains of Colorado for a journey on board the Durango and Silverton narrow gauge railroad. We'll traverse the famous High Line, which was hand-carved out of this rock face back in 1882. We'll also show you what it takes to keep all its original engines and cars on the rails today, and even show you how they change a tire on a steam locomotive. All these railway adventures and more coming up next on this episode of Great Scenic Railway Journeys. Our next steam trains worked hard for a living, hauling logs down the steep slopes of the West Virginia mountains. The Cass Scenic Railway boasts the largest number of Shay logging locomotives in the world. Today, those engines carry passengers to an elevation of nearly 5,000 feet to the peak of Bald Knob, the highest railroad point east of the Mississippi River. The town of Cass is located about 200 miles west of Washington, D.C., deep in the Appalachian spine of West Virginia. Cass has a fascinating history, mainly because it began life as a company town in the early 1900s. The community had only one purpose: harvesting, preparing, and shipping Appalachian hardwood and wood products for a growing nation. Special steam engines were needed to haul the massive loads of logs off the steep slopes of these mountains.
The move was on to try to find a locomotive that would handle the kind of track that lumber companies were using.
A Michigan lumberman named Ephraim Shea had the answer: a new kind of steam engine that would revolutionize mountain logging.
He came up with this improbable looking thing that essentially it rode on four-wheel trucks like railroad cars do, especially freight cars. And that gave it the flexibility of a boxcar as opposed to an engine with a big bunch of huge driving wheels. And it worked.
Even today, the Shay locomotive is a twirling wonder, intricate low gears providing power and stability, two elements crucial for safe mountain railroading. Today, Cass has the largest roster of operating Shay locomotives anywhere in the world. It's a true marvel that these fascinating machines are still working today, thanks to some local business people who in 1962 persuaded the West Virginia legislature that the state should go into the tourist railroad business following the mill's sudden closure 2 years earlier. The railroad offers several unique trips, which allow visitors to experience what railroading was like on this line back in the early 1900s.
One of our popular excursions, and a little bit shorter in length, is the Whitaker trip, about 2 hours. It takes you up to an old meadow with logging displays, a pavilion, and other activities.
This camp of the 1940s shows both the living quarters and the equipment used by the loggers of that time period. The most popular trip the railroad offers is the Bald Knob excursion. Here you climb over 4,800 feet, traversing through some of the most breathtaking scenery that West Virginia has to offer.
Bald Knob is the flagship excursion. It takes you to the highest point on a standard gauge railroad east of the Rockies. Clear days, you're looking into the state of Virginia.
There's a sense of tranquility and peace for those that get to take in these views atop this 4,800-foot mountain. It's truly an uplifting experience.
Literally and figuratively, the whole day has just been an up. And here we are sitting on the top of the world, looking out. It's pretty darn cool.
It's like being in an otherworld experience. There's no sound of civilization other than human voices.
It's breathtaking. It's an adventure because you get to see all the natural beauty and the wildlife that wouldn't otherwise be seen, especially like if you're riding in a car.
Cass is more than just a train ride. You get to take narrative tours to see the mill ruins, walks through town, and then to go through the Cass shops and see how these locomotives operate and how they're maintained.
We do the machine work in there. We do all the boiler work. We have all the boiler tools. Anything to do with the gears, the wheels, anything like that. We can do everything there is to.
One thing that railroad veterans everywhere are concerned about is the future. Not that the public's fascination with steam locomotives will decline or the demand won't be there for tourist railroad experiences. The concern is about where their replacements will come from.
It's very hard to find people to work on. The younger generation isn't that interested. It's not easy to find anybody. They come and go, and I'm worried about it. It's not just a job. You have to be like me. You gotta live and breathe these things to keep them going, because it's a lot of work.
Whether accented by brilliant fall colors or just an ordinary day atop one of West Virginia's tallest mountains and the highest railroad peak east of the Mississippi, there's always something enjoyable to experience at Cass Scenic Railroad State Park. Cass is not the only place in West Virginia to see geared locomotives at work. Just a few miles up the Greenbrier River from Cass is the old logging town of DURBIN. Here you can take a ride on North America's oldest climax steam engine. DURBIN is located 20 miles north of Cass and is home to the DURBIN and Greenbrier Valley Railroad. The pride of this line is the railway's 1910 Climax steam engine.
It's the oldest operating Climax locomotive in the world. They're a geared locomotive, all-wheel drive. They're made to run on rough, uneven track. They're not made for speed. They're made for power.
When it was new, Climax number 3 was a manufacturer's floor model. Railroads got to try it out before deciding to purchase. The original owner got a deal on this Climax and then used it to haul logs out of the West Virginia mountains. After retirement, the engine ended up on display for many years in a Connecticut museum. The railway purchased it and returned it to its West Virginia roots. Climax engines are distinguished from other geared locomotives by their highly visible steam cylinders and piston rods, which deliver power directly to each truck or set of wheels through a transmission and a pair of drive shafts.
It's kind of in its natural habitat. We try to keep this thing as natural as possible as far as looking like 60 years ago. So we ride in the old cabooses along the river. The track is somewhat kept in a condition that looks like an old logging line. We have a logging locomotive, so to speak. And in effect, it looks like it belongs right here. It's something that would have been here years and years ago, and so you kind of go back in time. And so you get kind of a down-home experience here at Durbin, leaving from the old depot with a locomotive that, in effect, would have pulled into this depot years ago.
The Rocket pulls a collection of diverse and colorful rail cars dating back as far as 1899. The Durbin Rocket gently rumbles for 11 miles in its 2-hour journey along the Greenbrier River. At your halfway point, you have time for an enchanting river stop.
It's great. It's a chance to get the kids out and have some fun, get them in the water, get them off the train for a couple minutes. It makes it really nice, kind of the mix of both.
The Durbin Rocket has a large collection of cabooses. The most sought-after ones are the Wabashes. They create perhaps the most romantic Durbin and Greenbrier excursion, the Castaway Caboose.
Happy anniversary! See you on Sunday!
It's a one-of-a-kind camping experience in the great outdoors. Ken and Stacy, celebrating their 3rd wedding anniversary, were enchanted by their surroundings.
It's great. It's like we're in the wilderness all by ourselves. The caboose, the river being right here, having the fire pit, being out on our own.
We're off the grid here, so we don't have to be connected to a wire anywhere, and that's nice.
No matter if you stay overnight or take a day trip on this line, it will not only take you back in time, but give you a feeling of your younger years.
It brings out the child in you again. You never, ever, ever get sophisticated enough that you don't love a train. All train trips excite me, but this one in particular because it is fall. It's the 1st of October in West Virginia, so that's the most beautiful time of the year. And I brought my friends with me. I have my friends here from New York and some friends from Virginia, and they said be sure and include a train trip, so I did.
The line runs 5.5 miles along the Greenbrier River, where a devastating flood in 1985 challenged the very survival of this railroad.
The water got up here and washed all the flood out and washed all the ballast and everything, just kind of floated out. And the expectation now is to get it back up on the hillside.
During the days when the train isn't running, you'll find Donald and Eldon out clearing and rebuilding the track.
We just keep working our way slowly down the valley. Of course, every bend of the river, every left-hand bend of the river flooded the track. It's a slow process.
But one that is coming close to being completed, and soon folks will be able to ride down these tracks all the way to the town of Cass. Well, some people would say, I can't imagine living way out here in the middle of nowhere, while others wouldn't have it any other way. But no matter what their choice, all are likely to agree on one thing.
Anybody who wants to have a good time, they should come and ride the train.
I've never been on anything like this before. I don't think I've ever been on a train other than to drive into New York City, and this is quite different than that.
You can see beautiful blue sky, and the trees are just starting to turn with fall colors. The air is fresh and clean, except for a little bit of steam engine smoke that you get, but it's just really nice to be in nature.
For the Durbin and Greenbrier and every other tourist railroad, providing an enjoyable, historically authentic experience is what it's all about.
I would say the main draw is the feel that you're going in a bygone era, a time that everybody feels like was something good. And so people come here and they relax. We even tell them, if you're in a hurry, don't ride the train, because it's going to be something slow and relax. You see wildlife, you see the river, and all the while the train's huffing and chuffing, and you get this feeling that times are slower and better.
Everything you do, your working day life is worthwhile when you can get away to a place like this. This preserved in time. It's just like it had always been. Nothing's changed.
Western movies and steam trains seem to go hand in hand, and the Durango and Silverton narrow gauge railroad has been in plenty of good films. One of the most famous was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Of course, the major draw for Hollywood is the breathtaking scenery. This railway is located in the southwest corner of the state of Colorado, near the Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah borders. The 45 miles of track from Durango to Silverton were laid in only 11 months over unforgiving geography back in 1881 and 82. The objective was to move gold and silver ore from the San Juan Mountains to the smelter in Durango. But there was also another objective, to create a tourist railroad so passengers too could enjoy the breathtaking scenery.
Well, it always amazes me when I ride on something that's historic like this. I think about when the track was put in and what they had and the equipment they had. It was pretty much manual labor and black powder probably.
Imagine in 1882, men hanging by ropes using hand drills and black powder, creating this high line, about a 3-mile experience where you're lying 400 feet on a cliff above the Animas River.
You look up and you feel very small in looking at everything, and it's phenomenal. There's just nothing more that you can say about it.
In 1882, it cost around $1,000 a foot to carve out the cliff face, known around the world as the High Line. Today, the ride looks the same as it did then. Passengers can look up and down, along the cliff's sheer drop as their train snakes around the bends, and wonder what it was like to ride this marvel over 100 years ago.
Several publications have rated this ride on the Durango and Silverton as one of the top 10 rides in the world. And the High Line, where we're standing on these cliffs, is probably the most single photograph site on any railroad in the world.
The coal-fired steam engines that do the hard work of negotiating these rails every day were manufactured specifically for this line back in the early 1900s.
6 steam locomotives require an inordinate amount of maintenance and work on them. They have a lot of revolving, reciprocating, and sliding parts.
We can do 98% of what needs to be done to these steam locomotives in our shop here. Everything we do is pretty much machined for a specific purpose. There's no 2 parts are alike to the same locomotive or to different locomotives. It's all make it for that individual need.
On this day, Babcock is putting steam train tires onto wheels, a tad more complicated than an auto garage.
Here you're actually having to cut the metal and fit it to the wheel. And this one is different from the next one I'll do, from the next one after that by a little bit. And this will not come back off. Whereas a tire you can change again. This has to be cut off.
It's precise and tough work.
To be a cessna mechanic on a steam railroad, you have to have a willingness to get dirty and have it not bother you. Everything is heavy, everything is hot, everything is dirty.
The grueling work has a payoff beyond a paycheck.
I hope, that my kids can come over here in another couple of decades and enjoy this or be a part of this as I've been able to.
And we're maintaining a part of history, and because of that, there's virtually millions of people that have come here and enjoyed our equipment, our ride, and our railroad.
Another authentic attraction of the Durango and Silverton, the turntable. It's especially intriguing to visitors.
It was like walking into the past. It was like walking back in time 100 years.
The historical significance of the Durango and Silverton Railroad is that it is in its original location with its original structures. The depot was built in 1881 when the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad first came to this area and actually established and founded the town of Durango. The roundhouse was built shortly thereafter to house and maintain the locomotives, many of which were still operating today.
The railway prides itself on its history. One of Al Harper's missions is to continue to rebuild some of the original rolling stock.
The day I bought the railroad, somebody started showing me pictures of the Silver Vista. It's nearly 10 years ago. And I said, we got to have that car back. This year, on my first ride on the Silver Vista, I saw things I hadn't seen in 10 years. It is a total different perspective and a unique experience.
It's a beautiful job they've done to restore it. You can see everything, any place you look, you can see. It's just great.
There are plenty of smiles to go along with the fascinating historical perspective that can be gained riding Alan Harper's line, which carries something close to 200,000 passengers every year.
Well, my husband and I have been coming up here for 35 years. The scenery is so beautiful, and it's just being able to see this part of Colorado back through the backwoods like this instead of from the highway is just amazing. And plus there's so much history to it. I just wanted her to experience it like we did when we were growing up.
And let's give credit. God gave us the most beautiful place on earth, the most beautiful place, and we're able to share it. And that's what's neat.
There's no doubt about it. Those who choose to make the 90-mile round trip between Durango and Silverton will love the experience, and most likely will want to come back someday and do it all over again.
For history's sake, it was good we were cut off from the rest of the world, because what it did was landlock all this equipment, all these skills, and all these people in a time warp of history. And so we are a railroad. We're in an 1882 experience.
On our next episode of Great Scenic Railway Journeys, we'll head north of the border to one of Canada's premier trains, the Alberta Prairie. This railway likes to present an entertainment side of rail travel as it transports you through the hills and prairies north of Calgary.
Here's one now! 5'2".
From singers serenading you on the train,
You give us all your money, man?
robbers taking all your spare change, and a home-cooked meal at your halfway point. This journey is one of a kind. Next, we'll travel to America's heartland and visit the historic Boone and Scenic Valley Railroad. It has the distinction of having the last commercially produced steam engine in the world. The highlight on this journey is the stately crossing of the Bass Point Creek Bridge, which spans over 785 feet across the valley below. You'll also meet the men and women that volunteer their time to keep it all rolling. Last stop, the Heber Valley Railroad, which is nestled in the mountains east of Salt Lake City. This scenic line carries its passengers through the stunning valleys and lakes that were formed here during the last ice age. The railroad offers many different excursions for its patrons, including our favorite, the Sunset Special, where you're transported to a beautiful picnic area and treated to a barbecue cookout. All these railway adventures and more coming up on our next episode of Great Scenic Railway Journeys. If you'd like to find out more about Great Scenic Railway Journeys and the railroads you've seen in this series, visit our website at www.gsrj.com. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our look at some of North America's most scenic and historic tourist steam railways and all the beautiful equipment here at the California State Railroad Museum. I'm David Holt, and until the next Great Scenic Railway Journeys, all aboard!
Get on board, we're ready to go. See the world from the scenic railroad. From the snow-capped mountains to the sunny coast. On the Great Scenic Railway Journey.